Hey everybody, it's Daniel Glass. I'm here at the Crescent Symbol headquarters in Kennesaw, Georgia, hitting on some of these beautiful crescent plates today. And I thought I'd take a minute and share a little history lesson with y'all. And I just recently completed a book called The Roots of Rock Drumming that I did in collaboration with Steve Smith and the guys from Hudson Music. It's a book of interviews of 22 of the legends that actually created rock and roll drumming in the early years from the mid-50s up to the era of Ringo. And, you know, I'm really into the whole history thing, but in reading and editing these interviews, I learned a tremendous amount more. And one of my favorite interviews from the book is with the great Bernard Purdie. And in learning his story, I began to understand how he had put together his very famous groove, the Purdie Shuffle, that a lot of people know and love. It's on a lot of famous records. So I want to lay out some of that history for you guys. So in the mid-60s, Bernard was playing on a lot of funk and soul records. And one of the most popular of those records was a tune called Rock Steady by Aretha Franklin. And in that tune, Bernard puts in this thing that he does with the hi-hat. Right? This kind of offbeat hi-hat punch. And he started throwing this thing in at the end of records at the fade out. He would throw this in as a little lick, and suddenly it was like, wow, this is so cool. And suddenly everybody got into this. Now, when I was a kid growing up in the 1970s, that was the hot lick to play. Every drummer would work that lick into whatever it was that they were doing. And so it's kind of fun to think, okay, now I know where this comes from and what made it so popular. So I'm going to just mess around with the kind of that rock steady groove, that Aretha Franklin rock steady groove. So here we go. So fun, really fun groove to play, really fun little lick. And Bernard in the interview, he calls that the Purdie lick. So also around the same time, mid-60s, Bernard starts taking your standard shuffle and doing some cool stuff with that, again with opening the hi-hat. And one of the great tunes you can hear how he messes around with this is a 1965 tune by the Platters called With This Ring. Basically, he just takes a basic standard shuffle and starts to do this kind of open-footed thing with the hi-hat, where he just sort of socks the hi-hat on beats 1, 2, 3, and 4 to give it this nice chunky feel. So here's an example of how he would do that. Ready? 1, 2, 1, 2. So again, it's to add this kind of cool thing kind of happening. Now, as we move into the 70s, all of these licks that Bernard is doing on these records, these hit records coming out of New York, start to become standard, and you hear them more and more and more in the, you know, every drummer's starting to use them. And as we move into the 70s, we go from kind of this, to take the shuffle feel, this basic standard shuffle, and they kind of break it into like a halftime shuffle feel. So one of the first times you hear this halftime shuffle feel is on Stevie Wonder's Superstition. So instead of having a basic shuffle that goes typical shuffle, now they cut it in half, so you get this sort of halftime feel with it. So it sounds like this. Okay, so for example, Superstition, the song sounds like this. Right, so you get that kind of half-timey feel. Well, Bernard takes all these hi-hat ideas and combines it with this halftime shuffle feel, and lo and behold, we come up with the 20Shuffle. So I'm going to sort of demonstrate a little bit about what the 20Shuffle sounds like, and you could see how he explores those ideas and puts them in. And that's how we kind of get to all the famous hits that he played on the Steely Dan songs, and all the great drummers like Jeff Porcaro and John Bonham that borrowed that 20Shuffle and used it in their own bands. So here's a little bit of the 20Shuffle.